There are moments when silence is not the absence of words, but the presence of power. In a world that compels us to speak, defend, explain, and argue, there is divine wisdom in holding your tongue. There is strength in stillness. God does not call you to silence to punish you. He calls you to silence so that you may rise above the noise, hear your spirit, and be guided by purpose rather than impulse. Sometimes peace is not found in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. There is a sacred kind of stillness that wraps around you when you decide to keep your mouth closed and let the world continue spinning without your voice in the center of it. It is not cowardice. It is not surrender. It is wisdom. God calls you into silence because He knows the cost of peace and the weight that words can carry. You may feel the urge to respond, to defend yourself, to explain your pain or correct someone's version of your story. But not every fire needs your breath to burn. Some things die on their own when left untouched. There are days when the most powerful act of self-love you can offer is to not engage. The noise around you will pull at your pride, tug at your insecurities, and invite your ego to the front of the room. But if you listen carefully, you'll hear a softer voice, one that whispers, "Let it be." That whisper is not weakness. It is strength clothed in patience. You don't have to make a point to prove you matter. You don't have to react to every disrespect to reclaim your worth. God knows the truth, and sometimes that has to be enough. Your peace is too expensive to rent out to nonsense. Holding your tongue can feel like a loss when you're misunderstood, overlooked, or misrepresented. But silence isn't a void, it's a guard. It shields your energy, protects your spirit, and gives you space to heal without interference. The moment you choose peace over pride, you step into a different kind of power. The power that doesn't need to announce itself. The power that sits calmly in the face of chaos and says, "I will not be moved." That is the kind of peace silence offers. And if you're honest, you've probably spoken words you later wished you could take back. Words released in anger, fear, or frustration have the ability to burn bridges you may one day wish you'd walked across. God sees what's ahead. He knows what you don't. That's why He nudges your spirit to stay silent. Because your future needs you calm, your destiny needs you focused, and your healing needs you present. You don't have to explain why you're silent. Let them assume, let them question, let them wonder. You are not responsible for managing other people's confusion. You are responsible for protecting your peace, and in protecting that peace, you are honoring your journey. Some things are too precious to be discussed with just anyone. Some emotions are too raw to be unpacked aloud. So if God tells you to keep your mouth shut, trust that it's not punishment, it's preparation. Peace is a weapon, and silence is its sheath. When you learn to use both, you stop reacting to the noise and start responding to the truth. You do not need to shout the truth to make it real. Truth doesn't require volume. It requires integrity. It doesn't stumble when left unspoken, because it has a way of revealing itself with or without your help. When you hold your tongue, when you choose silence over explanation, you are not abandoning the truth. You are allowing it to mature in its own time, because real truth is like the sunrise. You don't have to drag it into the sky. It comes when it's ready, and when it does, no darkness can stop it. There's a quiet strength in choosing not to defend yourself, not because you're guilty, not because you don't care, but because you know that truth has a heartbeat of its own. When you speak, people might argue. When you stay silent, they're forced to sit with their own assumptions, and in that discomfort, the truth will surface. Let your actions be the testimony. Let your consistency be the proof. Let your life speak so loud that your mouth never has to. That's the kind of truth that can't be denied. You see, when you rush to defend yourself, you often interrupt what God is trying to reveal. He might be exposing someone's character or preparing a lesson for someone else through your silence. If you step in with explanations and justifications, you might be protecting someone from the very truth they need to face. Silence isn't about ignoring the issue, it's about trusting the process. Truth isn't in a hurry, it's not afraid of delay. It waits patiently because it knows its time is coming. The world teaches us that we must clap back, set the record straight, and always have the last word. But sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. When you remain silent, you take the spotlight off yourself and place it back on the truth. And the truth, no matter how long it takes, has a divine way of coming to light. You don't have to chase justice, it will find you. You don't have to force understanding. Those meant to see you clearly will, in time. Let them misunderstand you. Let them speak on things they know nothing about. Let them create stories around your silence. You owe no one your peace for the sake of being understood. Sometimes the truth you carry is too sacred to be shared with just anyone. Sometimes the weight of your story is meant to be held by God alone. And He knows how to handle it. He knows how to reveal it. He knows how to vindicate you without you lifting a single word. So stay quiet, walk tall, move forward. Let truth do what it always does, rise. Because in the end, people may forget what you said, but they will never forget what you showed them. Truth doesn't need your voice to live. It just needs your faith to wait. There is a kind of silence that doesn't just settle the room, it settles your soul. It is in that quiet space, away from the voices of others, away from your own racing thoughts, where the whispers of God become clear. So often we rush to speak, to fill the air with words, to be heard, to be seen. But some of the most powerful moments of growth happen in stillness. When you choose not to speak, when you allow yourself to pause, you open the door for revelation. God doesn't compete with noise. He waits until you're still enough to listen. In the silence there's learning. You begin to notice things that your words once drowned out. The patterns of your thoughts, the cries of your heart, the burdens you've carried for too long without admitting. Silence becomes a classroom and life becomes the lesson. You don't need a platform to receive wisdom. You need space. And in the space between your last word and your next decision, God teaches. He speaks in the spaces where you stop trying to be strong and just let yourself be real. That's when you start to hear the truth you've been avoiding. That's when clarity begins to surface. And when you're silent, you start to hear not only God's voice, but your own. Your inner voice, so often buried beneath other people's expectations, rises. You begin to separate what you truly believe from what you've been taught to repeat. You start to recognize your own convictions, your own dreams, your own pain, and that recognition is powerful, because you can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge. You can't grow past what you keep covering with noise. When you hush the outside world, you give your inner world a chance to breathe. That's why silence is sacred. It's where transformation begins. Not in the shouting, not in the proving, not in the loud declarations, but in the deep, quiet places where you meet yourself and God at the same time. It's not always comfortable. Sometimes silence will confront you with truths you weren't ready to face. But even that discomfort is holy because it means you're growing, it means you're listening, it means you're alive to the process even when you can't yet explain what's happening, and you don't need to rush it. You don't need to come out of the silence with answers or declarations. Let it do its work. Let the quiet mend what's been broken. Let the hush of God's presence wrap around your weary mind. In time, the words will come. But they'll be rooted in wisdom, not reaction. They'll be full of grace, not defense. And when you do speak, it will not be to prove yourself, but to reflect the truth you found when you were finally quiet enough to hear. Sometimes silence isn't a surrender. It's a strategy. There are moments in life when God instructs you to be quiet not because you are powerless, but because your power is best preserved in restraint. The enemy thrives on chaos, on reaction, on emotional outbursts. When you stay silent, you starve that chaos. You refuse to give the enemy what he's waiting for: your energy, your peace, your dignity. Holding your tongue may feel unnatural in the heat of conflict, but silence, when guided by discernment, becomes a shield that cannot be pierced. People will provoke you, life will test you. There will be words said behind your back, lies told with confidence, and false narratives that spread faster than truth ever could. The temptation to defend yourself will rise like a fire in your chest. But if you give in, you may find yourself drained and disappointed, still misunderstood and now depleted too. But when you remain silent, you don't just protect your energy, you redirect it. You allow your actions, your character, and your consistency to speak for you louder than any argument ever could. The enemy is clever. He doesn't always show up in grand battles or obvious attacks. Sometimes he comes subtly in petty conversations, in misunderstandings, in whispers that beg for your attention. But God wants you to recognize the trap. He wants you to see that not every offense needs a response, not every disrespect needs a reaction. When you choose silence, you are not ignoring what happened. You are refusing to be ruled by it. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's authority. You have to understand that not everyone deserves access to your voice. Not everyone has earned the right to hear your side of the story. When you speak, you give people pieces of your heart, and some will twist those pieces just to feel powerful. But when you stay silent, you stay in control. You keep your peace. You hold your center. You stand in the presence of God and let Him handle what you can't. And He will, because God honors the quiet strength of those who trust Him to fight their battles. Sometimes the best clapback is elevation. While others are busy talking, you're busy growing. While they're stirring drama, you're walking in purpose. Let them talk, let them assume. Your life will show them everything they need to know. And when you rise, and you will rise, it will be evident that it was not because you shouted the loudest, but because you trusted the deepest. You kept your mouth closed and let God open doors. You stayed still while He moved mountains. You were silent, but not asleep. You were patient, not passive. And now your peace speaks volumes. So next time you're tempted to respond, remember, not every silence is empty. Some silences are full of firepower. Some silences are divine shields. And the most dangerous kind of power is the kind that doesn't flinch when provoked. The kind that lets God be God. There's a rhythm to life that can't be rushed, and God, being the master conductor, knows exactly when to bring in every note. Sometimes the silence He calls you into isn't forever, it's for a season. A moment of divine pause, a hush before the unveiling. When He tells you to keep your mouth shut, it's not to silence your voice permanently, but to prepare your voice for the right moment. There's a sacred timing to everything, and when you speak too soon, you risk spoiling the message or stepping out of alignment with what was meant to be revealed in fullness. It's tempting to speak prematurely, to release the vision before it's ready, to defend yourself before God finishes preparing your table in front of your enemies. But premature speech can be like harvesting fruit. Before it's ripe, it looks good, but it lacks the sweetness, the depth, the impact it was meant to carry. That's why God sometimes presses your spirit to stay quiet.